Thank you, Secretary Buttigieg, for being here today. Mayor Pete, you know that there is no better investment than public infrastructure. In the 3 years since the bipartisan infrastructure law was signed, our country, especially Arizona, has benefited. In fact, just last week, Valley Metro received over $15 million to expand the streetcar system from the city of Tempe into the city of Mesa. And in January, Arizona received a $95 million infra grant to widen Interstate 10. And that investment directly benefits the Gila River Indian community, helping fulfill the administration's goal to direct 40% of infrastructure dollars to historically disadvantaged communities. And I know you agree, the success of the 22 federally recognized tribes is critical to all of Arizona, just like tribal communities all across the United States of America. You know, we have not kept up our treaty obligations to our tribal partners, especially in underinvestment in infrastructure. And this administration wants equity in transportation investments. I applaud that. What are you and DOT doing specifically to channel investment to our tribes and tribal communities?
Well, thanks for the question. Every time I'm in Indian country, I see the extraordinary need and the demand that those tribal governments face, maintaining often extraordinarily extensive road networks with shockingly little by way of funding. It's one of the reasons we work to increase support for tribal as well as rural communities, and we've been pleased to see a lot of success in terms of some of the competitive grant processes, including, as you mentioned, the Gila River Indian community. I'm really excited about what we can do with them on I-10. We now have an assistant secretary level office for supporting tribal communities, all 574 of them, and specific programs, including our Tribal Technical Assistance Program, to help make sure that these communities can succeed, not just in winning those grants, but also in delivering them, because we know it can be a real challenge after you get the good news to see those processes through.
That's great. Mr. Secretary, you and I have both heard so many horror stories about the air travel experience for passengers with disabilities, particularly people who utilize mobility devices. This committee has worked hard on the issue on the recently passed FAA reauthorization, including a couple of bills that I authored to make the travel experience better. You have made this a priority as well. Why is this important, and what more work do we have to do to support passengers with disabilities?
When you talk to passengers with disabilities, particularly wheelchair users, you hear so many stories of the experiences that they have had that reflect really a lack of access to safe and dignified air travel. So we have issued a final rule that's requiring airlines to make lavatories on new single-aisle aircraft large enough for passengers with wheelchairs, after hearing stories of passengers who either dehydrate themselves or just don't fly at all because they don't have access to an accessible bathroom. And in March, we published a notice of proposed rulemaking for new requirements on training and practices, making it clear that damaging or delaying wheelchairs is a violation that can be met with penalties. Some wheelchair users have told me that arriving in a destination without a wheelchair is like arriving without your legs, and it doesn't just ruin your trip, but if an airline takes forever to fix it, that affects you long after you have returned home. So we're going to continue to work with advocates, and we're going to take a tough line on these any violations here, because it really is just unacceptable for passengers to go through what some passengers tell us about.
I very much look forward to working with you on that, because it stops job opportunities and so many other ways that it impacts the lives of people with disabilities who are talented and deserve to have the passenger experience improved. As mayor of Phoenix, I propose and ask voters to approve the single largest transportation infrastructure plan in Arizona history, the first of its kind in scope, to expand public transit, including our light rail system, and modernize our roadways. They did by an overwhelming margin. This year, the people of Maricopa County will decide again with Prop 479, a proposed dedicated half-cent sales tax extension to fund critical transportation. Mr. Secretary, as communities across the country vie for competitive federal funding, explain why it's important for states and localities to have their own dedicated transportation funding source to be competitive for those grants?
Well, I appreciate the question because with the historic funding available through the bipartisan infrastructure law, I don't want anybody to get the idea that that means states or local governments shouldn't do much. The reality is the more you can put together on a state or local basis, the more you can unlock on the federal side and the better partner we can be. So we applaud cities and states that are taking the initiative to fund their infrastructure needs, knowing that we have a wind at their back in the form of the programs and grants we have.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
The gentleman yields.